So next up, we're going to have a look at the relationship between occupancy on air quality and what actually makes this air quality drop. So the two graphs here are showing a week period from a client of ours in London back in November 21. And you can see immediately there is a very strong pattern between the two. When occupancy is high, CO2 is higher. When occupancy is very low, CO2, like on the weekend, CO2 is nice and stable, doesn't peak, doesn't change. So it's the occupancy that is driving this change in CO2. And what's interesting is that, as you can see on the days throughout the week, occupancy doesn't change much throughout the day, but CO2 levels creep up throughout the entire day until they hit quite dangerous levels of 1,200 parts per million at times. And what's happening here is ventilation systems are struggling to replace the air that people are breathing. So CO2 is increasing throughout the day until the air is stale and it needs to be replaced. So that's the relationship we have between occupancy and air quality. Let's now look at what we can do to mitigate this and keep that CO2 level nice and flat throughout the week. The first thing we can do is use occupancy data to redistribute how people interact with spaces. And as you saw in the graph on the previous slide, occupancy tends to fluctuate throughout the week, with Monday and Friday being a bit emptier, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday being when people like to come into the office. So what you can do with this information is try and think, right, what can we do to flatten occupancy throughout the week? Stop it bunching up in the middle and try to lower it so that even if there are fluctuations in the day of CO2, they're not as drastic and they don't get anywhere near as high. Secondly, what we can do is look at the actual spaces within our office, not just the overall occupancy, but where are people going? Where's busy? Where's empty? How can we get people to go to that floor that's a bit further away, or that annex that's a bit around the corner? How do we make people spread themselves out so that the air they're breathing doesn't get recycled between people quite so quickly and those CO2 levels rise? Similarly, you can start to look at which assets people are kind of flocking to. Are people going to the collaboration areas? Are they going to the sit-stand desks? Are there areas of condensed occupancy continuously throughout the day that maybe you should be providing more of so that people can spread themselves out throughout them? And finally, occupancy data can be used on a departmental basis to see, is this department in the office all the time, quite close together, and could they do with more space? And which departments are behaving differently and potentially have some space that we could steal some seats from to spread this department out a bit more.